When a narcissistic woman tries to reel you back in, the first thing you must understand is that this moment is not about love, regret, or sudden self-awareness. It is about control. What you are witnessing is a psychological reflex, the loss of your attention. Your emotional energy and your availability creates a disturbance in her inner world. And like all disturbances that threaten the ego, it demands correction. This is why the return often feels sudden and strangely well timed. A message arrives just as you begin to regain clarity. An apology appears once you've stopped seeking one. This is not coincidence. It is a maneuver known as hoovering, an attempt to restore the familiar dynamic where your emotions orbit her needs. The content of the message may sound sincere, even reflective, but sincerity is not proven by words. It is proven by sustained change, and that is precisely what is missing. Carl Jung spoke often about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to confront. In narcissistic personalities, that shadow is vast and fiercely protected. When you leave, you become a mirror reflecting what she does not want to see. Her dependence, her insecurity, her lack of inner stability. Reeling you back in is not about reconnection. It is about silencing that mirror. The danger lies in misinterpreting this moment as growth. When someone has truly changed, they respect distance. They do not intrude upon boundaries under the disguise of concern. If the return creates confusion, urgency, or emotional pressure, it is not healing, it is manipulation. Recognize this early, because awareness is the point where power shifts. The moment you see the pattern clearly is the moment you are no longer obligated to repeat it. Once you recognize the attempt to pull you back in, the next temptation is to explain yourself, to clarify, to make sure you are understood. This impulse feels reasonable, even mature, but psychologically, it is the exact doorway the narcissistic dynamic needs in order to restart itself. Explanation, in this context, is not communication, it is submission to a familiar script. A narcissistic woman does not seek understanding, she seeks engagement. When you explain your boundaries, you turn them into topics for negotiation. When you defend your decision, you imply it requires approval. And when you justify your distance, you place her back in the position of judge. None of this is accidental. These conversations are designed to pull you into emotional labor, where your energy is slowly redirected away from self, respect, and back toward managing her reactions. Jung understood that individuation requires separation from the unconscious demands of others. The moment you begin defending your choices to someone who benefits from your self-doubt, you are no longer individuating, you are regressing. Silence in this situation is not avoidance, it is psychological clarity. It communicates something words never can, that your inner authority no longer needs external validation. This is why brief, neutral responses, or no response at all, are so destabilizing to a narcissistic personality. They remove the emotional oxygen from the interaction. Without your explanations, there is nothing to twist, nothing to weaponize, nothing to use as leverage. If your boundary needs a speech to survive, it was never a boundary. True boundaries are not argued. They are lived. And the moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment your power quietly returns to you. After silence and restraint, the next challenge is emotional. You may not respond outwardly, yet internally you feel the pull, anger, Nostalgia, guilt, even a desire to prove something. This is where many people lose their footing. A narcissistic woman does not require your presence to exert influence. She only needs your emotional reaction. Reaction is the true currency of control. From a Jungian perspective, this dynamic operates at the level of the unconscious. The narcissistic personality externalizes its inner chaos, provoking emotional movement in others to avoid confronting it within itself. When you react, whether with rage or compassion, you absorb what was never yours to carry. Emotional neutrality, therefore, is not coldness. It is psychological hygiene. Indifference unsettles the narcissistic structure because it removes the reflective surface she depends on. No anger to fight, no sadness to exploit, no affection to reclaim. What remains is silence, and silence forces confrontation with the self, something the narcissistic psyche resists at all costs. This is why even calm responses can escalate her behavior. It is not your words that disturb her, it is your emotional absence. Holding your ground emotionally requires discipline. It means noticing the surge of feeling without obeying it. Jung described this as strengthening the observing ego, the part of you that watches the impulse without becoming possessed by it. When you do this, you stop being a character in someone else's psychological drama. This is not about winning an argument or proving superiority. It is about reclaiming authorship over your inner world. The moment your emotions stop being accessible to manipulation is the moment the dynamic collapses. Control ends where reaction ends. As emotional distance grows, another subtle danger appears, the distortion of memory. When a narcissistic woman tries to reel you back in, she rarely confronts the past honestly. Instead, she edits it. The pain fades, the chaos is softened, and what remains are carefully selected moments of warmth, intimacy, and promise. This is not remembrance, it is psychological revision. Human memory is not objective. Jung understood that memory bends under emotional pressure, especially when the unconscious seeks comfort. In moments of loneliness or doubt, the mind naturally reaches for familiarity, even if that familiarity was destructive. The narcissistic dynamic relies on this weakness. By reminding you of what you had, she attempts to replace reality with sentiment, pulling you away from the truth that caused you to leave in the first place. This is why it is essential to remember not just what felt good, but what felt wrong. Recall the confusion, the erosion of self-trust, the way your energy was slowly redirected away from your own life. Healing does not erase these memories, it integrates them. Forgetting them is not forgiveness, it is vulnerability. The most dangerous phrase in this moment is, maybe it wasn't that bad. That thought does not arise from insight, it arises from fatigue. And fatigue is precisely when old patterns regain access. Growth demands that you honor your former clarity, not overwrite it with longing. You walked away because something within you recognized an inner violation. That recognition was not weakness, it was instinct sharpened by experience. Do not betray it now for the comfort of nostalgia. Memory is either a teacher or a trap. Remember wisely, because the truth you hold on to today determines the freedom you keep tomorrow. At this stage, many people believe the hardest part is over. You've recognized the pattern, restrained your reactions, and anchored yourself in memory. Yet this is where a final illusion often appears. The belief that one more conversation will bring closure, that a final explanation, a calm discussion, or a carefully chosen set of words will somehow resolve what was left unresolved. This belief is understandable, but it misunderstands the nature of the dynamic. Closure is not something a narcissistic woman can grant, because closure requires mutual reality. Boundaries, therefore, cannot live in conversation. The moment you open dialogue, the boundary becomes conditional, and anything conditional can be tested, stretched, or broken. This is why limits, expressed only in words, eventually collapse. Words invite interpretation, actions do not. From a Jungian standpoint, boundaries are an expression of individuation, the psychological process of becoming whole and self-directed. Individuation is not announced, it is embodied. Blocking access, limiting exposure, and refusing engagement are not acts of hostility. They are acts of self-definition. They communicate, without drama or explanation, that your inner life is no longer available for negotiation. This is often misunderstood as cruelty or avoidance. In reality, it is the highest form of responsibility for your own psychic well-being. A narcissistic dynamic survives only where access exists. Remove access, and the pattern starves. You are not required to convince someone of your worth, your pain, or your reasons. If someone needed an explanation in order to respect your boundary, they were never respecting you, only the leverage they had over you. A boundary that must be defended has already been crossed. Real boundaries are enforced by action, and action is where freedom begins. Once boundaries are set and access is removed, a quiet space opens, and this space is often unfamiliar. There is no chaos to react to, no emotional urgency demanding your attention. What remains is yourself. This is where the work truly begins, because narcissistic dynamics do not only condition relationships, they condition identity. For a long time, your sense of purpose may have been shaped around fixing, proving, enduring, or being chosen. When that role ends, the psyche must reorganize. Jung would describe this moment as an invitation to individuation, the turning inward where energy, once spent on survival, is redirected toward growth. The temptation here is to look back, not out of longing, but out of habit. The mind seeks intensity because intensity once masqueraded as meaning. But intensity is not depth, and chaos is not passion. What you are building now is quieter, but far more real. Redirecting your focus means investing in discipline, not distraction. It means choosing routines that strengthen your body, thoughts that sharpen your clarity, and goals that belong solely to you. Self-respect is not an emotion, it is a practice. Each time you choose consistency over drama, you weaken the old pattern and reinforce a new internal structure. This is also where regret often shifts sides. A narcissistic woman may attempt to return because she senses your detachment. But the deeper truth is this: the more whole you become, the less accessible you are to manipulation. Growth removes you from the psychological marketplace where approval, validation, and attention are traded. You do not heal by proving you were valuable. You heal by no longer needing to prove it. When your life becomes grounded in self-respect, the past loses its power, and the future finally becomes yours to shape.